The miner crashed into a battlefield and walked out, holding their princess. Marcus toggled the last of the diagnostics on the battered control console, fingers moving with muscle memory honed by years of asteroid mining. The Lucky Finch hummed under his boots, her hull pocked, her engines tired, but she still answered his touch. Overhead, status lights flickered uncertainly, throwing his scarred features into harsh relief. "Finch," Marcus called, "give me a status on the oxygen scrubbers." The AI's voice crackled from the speakers, a dry baritone laced with boredom. "Oxygen at 78% efficiency, which is frankly impressive given your affinity for igniting things. Would you like a celebratory cough?" Marcus snorted, glancing at the cracked viewport. "Maybe later. Coil pressure readings? Marginal, like your sense of self-preservation." He was about to retort when the hull trembled, once, then again, much harder. Warning klaxons screamed, strobing red light across the cramped bridge. Finch's tone sharpened. "Marcus, we appear to be under attack. Shall I prepare your eulogy, or do you prefer to improvise?" Metal shrieked. The hull ruptured, shards of composite spinning through the air as Marcus was slammed sideways. A white-hot bloom of pain lanced through his shoulder. He caught himself on the edge of the pilot's chair, blinking blood from his eyes as Finch, unflappable, observed. "We are now actively combusting. Structural collapse is imminent. You should really consider moving, quickly." The air grew thin, tinged with the tang of burning insulation. Marcus staggered to the emergency locker, ripping it open. "Finch, status of the escape pod? If you hurry, you might survive long enough to regret your career choices." Another explosion shuddered through the ship. Marcus stumbled, nearly losing his grip on the locker's edge. Through the crackling calm, Finch added, "There's an anomalous gravity field outside, highly localized. Curious, but I recommend panic." Marcus threw himself down the corridor, boots slipping on debris. Sparks rained from the ceiling as he slammed his palm on the pod's hatch. Finch's voice followed, deadpan even as the world came apart. "Good luck, Marcus. Try not to explode." He barely strapped in before the pod jettisoned. The Lucky Finch vanished in a blossom of fire, then the pod was tumbling, shuddering, dragged by forces he could not see. Marcus's world shrank to blaring alarms and the shriek of tortured metal. Atmosphere slammed into him like a hammer. The pod's heat shield glowed molten orange. Gravity seized him, pulling him down, down, until the pod struck something solid with bone-cracking force. When Marcus came to, his ears rang. The hatch had blown open in the crash, and ochre sunlight spilled inside. He crawled out, gasping, every muscle ablaze with pain. He looked up. Rows upon rows of humanoid faces stared back at him, their expressions caught between shock and fascination. He was at the center of a colossal amphitheater, the sand beneath his palms warm, the air thrumming with anticipation. The crowd was like nothing he'd ever seen. Thousands of tall, lithe beings with pale skin, their silvery blue hair catching the light, feline ears twitching, elongated canines peeking between parted lips. Their eyes, amber green, slit-pupilled, tracked his every move. A commotion drew his gaze to the center pit. Two Falari warriors circled each other in elaborate armor, blades clashing with ringing metallic cries. Towering above them on a marble dais sat a young woman, regal, athletic, her poise unmistakable. Princess Lyra watched the duel with a critical eye, her hands resting lightly on the carved armrests. Then the air split with a monstrous, inhuman shriek. Iron doors crashed open. From the darkness, an insectoid behemoth stormed into the arena, a nightmare of chitin and sinew, bristling with jointed limbs and serrated claws. Its exoskeleton shimmered, black and bronze, as it hefted weapons that crackled with coruscating energy. Its compound eyes flared an electric blue. The Falari crowd hissed in alarm, recoiling as the creature ignored the ongoing duel and charged the dais. The guards froze, torn between their sacred customs and the sudden, abominable breach of protocol. Marcus saw the beast's trajectory, straight for the princess. Instinct shouted louder than fear. He surged to his feet, ignoring the searing pain in his side, and sprinted across the sand. "Move!" he roared, but the Falari were paralyzed by ceremony. Lyra's composure flickered, her eyes wide. The beast lunged, raising its crackling weapon. Marcus leapt, tackling her from the dais in a spray of dust, just as the monster's limbs scythed through the space where she had been. The impact drove the air from his lungs. He rolled, shielding Lyra with his battered body. Claws slashed, raking across his miner's suit. The reinforced polyfiber held for a heartbeat, then tore, and Marcus felt hot blood well from his side. He gritted his teeth, shoving Lyra behind him. The monster loomed above, mandibles clacking, energy weapon raised. Marcus scrambled for a weapon, anything, and his hand closed on a jagged fragment of escape pod hull, torn free in the crash. The beast struck again. Marcus rammed the hull shard between two plates of its exoskeleton, buying a precious second as the creature reared back in pain. He drew his plasma torch from his belt with numb fingers, thumbed it alive with a hiss of blue fire. The monster lunged. Marcus ducked under a flailing limb, thrusting upward, driving the torch deep into the gaping maw beneath its mandibles. Sparks flew. Acrid smoke billowed. The creature convulsed, limbs thrashing in agony. With a guttural cry, Marcus forced the torch deeper until at last the beast collapsed, twitching, its weapons sputtering out. For a long moment, silence reigned. The amphitheater watched, every breath suspended. Then the Falari matriarch rose from her seat, voice ringing clear. "Champion, by right of trial, the victory is yours, and so too, the hand of the princess." A roar of approval swept the stands, except for one furious, defeated challenger who bellowed his outrage. Marcus, swaying, tried to focus as the world blurred at the edges. Lyra knelt beside him, her usual composure shattered, her hand trembling as she brushed hair from his brow. He smiled, bloodied and weary, before darkness claimed him. The last thing he saw, her amber-green eyes wide with something like wonder or fear. Marcus drifted awake, breath shallow, his body swaddled in unfamiliar softness. The air was thick with the tang of herbal medicine, sharp, earthy, tinged with something metallic. He blinked at a ceiling of pale stone, etched with silver inlays that caught the filtered light and scattered it in delicate patterns across the chamber's walls. The bed beneath him was extravagantly plush, the sheets cool and smooth against his battered frame. He shifted, wincing as pain flared along his side. His hand came away sticky with ointment. The bandages were expertly wrapped, their fabric coarse but effective, and he caught the ghost of a wild floral scent as he breathed. A presence stirred at the far end of the room. Lyra sat on a carved bench, her posture immaculate even in repose, her gaze fixed on him with a wary intensity. In the soft glow of the chamber, she was every inch the princess, athletic, poised, her pale skin luminous against a gown of iridescent blue. Her feline ears twitched almost imperceptibly as she watched him. Marcus cleared his throat, voice raw. "I'm not dead, then." Lyra's lips twitched in a ghost of a smile. "Not for lack of trying. You heal well for a human." She hesitated, eyes narrowing. "You are in the victor's suite. It is a place of honor, though you may find it strange." He propped himself up on an elbow, surveying the room. Opulent, yet unmistakably alien. Pillars spiraled like the trunks of ancient trees, and fragrant steam rose from a basin set in the corner. On a side table sat a pitcher of water and a bowl of unfamiliar fruit, their skins shimmering with iridescent hues. "Strange is about right," he said, attempting a smile, "but I've woken up in worse." Lyra regarded him in silence for a moment, her gaze cool, thoughtful. "Your vessel was destroyed. You are stranded here, Marcus. You understand this?" He felt the words like a blow, final, unyielding. "Yeah, I figured as much. after the fireworks show. He reached for the water, grimacing as his wounds pulled. A flicker of surprise crossed Lyra's face, quickly masked. You saved me. The people will remember, but your fate is uncertain. He nodded, trying to process it all, and noticed a thin cut along her forearm, an angry line against her otherwise flawless skin. Blood beaded at the edge, sluggish and dark. You're hurt, Marcus said quietly. Lyra looked down, as if only now noticing the wound. It is nothing. Our healers will tend it. Let me help, he offered, reaching for the battered medkit at the bedside. I've patched up worse in the belt. She hesitated, suspicion flickering behind her amber-green eyes. Filari do not. Our customs. I'm not Filari, Marcus said gently. Let me. For a long moment, she weighed him with her gaze, as if searching for a hidden motive. Then, slowly, she extended her arm, the fine muscles tensed beneath her skin. Marcus activated the med spray and cleaned the cut, his hands steady and gentle. You have strange tools, Lyra murmured, watching the cool blue gel hiss over her skin. Just practical, Marcus replied, wrapping a strip of synth bandage around her forearm. You don't want it getting infected. His touch was warm and careful, so different from the possessive territorial gestures she knew from Filari males. His fingers brushed hers only by necessity, never lingering longer than needed. For a moment, the room seemed to shrink around them, the world narrowing to the soft rhythm of his breath and the steady pulse beneath her skin. Lyra's composure faltered. She studied his face, lined with exhaustion, scarred by old injuries, yet softened now by concern. You do not wish to claim your prize? She asked, her voice brittle. Champion of the trial. By custom, I am yours. Marcus looked up, meeting her gaze without flinching. I don't want to own anyone. I just saw someone in trouble. She drew her arm back, unsettled. You are very strange, Marcus of the Stars. He shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I get that a lot. The moment stretched between them, charged with something unspoken. From beyond the chamber's high windows, a murmur rose, a tide of voices swelling, urgent and discordant. Marcus caught only fragments, shouts, the clangor of weapons, and the deep, rolling cadence of Filari argument. What's happening out there? He asked, glancing toward the sound. Lyra's expression darkened. You are not universally welcome here. My father, the regent, sees you as a threat to his authority. The challenger you defeated, he demands retribution. Many fear what your presence means. Marcus exhaled, setting the medkit aside. Let me guess. They want me gone, or dead. She inclined her head. Yes, but the matriarch's word is law. She alone decides the outcome of the trial. As if summoned, the heavy doors swung open with a low chime. The matriarch entered, her bearing regal, silver hair falling like a cascade over her elaborate robes. Her eyes, sharp and ageless, appraised Marcus, then Lyra. Leave us, child, the matriarch said softly. Lyra hesitated, but the matriarch's tone brooked no argument. Marcus struggled to sit upright as the elder approached. She studied him in silence, then spoke. You have questions, human. Ask them. He swallowed. The beast. Why was it there? That wasn't part of the ceremony. The matriarch's lips thinned. It was not. The creature was meant to remain caged. An accident, or perhaps sabotage, set it free. The trial was designed to test the worth of those who would claim Lyra's hand, not through violence, but through the measure of their heart. Marcus frowned. So saving her wasn't expected? Few would risk themselves for another, not here. Most seek power, not protection. She watched him, her gaze piercing. You acted without thought of glory or gain. That is why you are champion, Marcus. Not by conquest, but by compassion. Marcus absorbed this in silence, feeling the weight of the words settle over him. What happens now? That depends on you, and on Lyra. The customs are old, but hearts can change. She touched his shoulder, a gesture both comforting and commanding. Rest. Heal. You are not as alone here as you believe. With a final glance at her granddaughter, the matriarch swept from the room, her presence leaving a hush in her wake. Lyra lingered by the door, her hands clenched at her sides. When Marcus caught her gaze, she looked away quickly. You heard, he said quietly. She nodded. You were never meant to fight that thing. It should not have been possible. Marcus managed a wry grin. I've made a career out of surviving the impossible. Lyra stepped closer, her guard momentarily lowered. Why did you do it? You knew nothing of me. You could have escaped. He met her eyes, his voice low and sincere. Because it was right. I couldn't just stand by. For a heartbeat, her face was open, vulnerable. You are not what I expected, she whispered. You are not like our warriors. You... She faltered, searching for words. You confuse me. Marcus chuckled softly, the sound rough but genuine. Story of my life. She turned away, hugging her injured arm, and paced to the window. The city sprawled below, its towers gleaming in the alien sun, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Outside, the voices of the city's power brokers rose and fell in heated debate, the fate of a stranger and a princess at stake. Within, Lyra's heart pounded with unfamiliar emotion, something caught between fear and hope. Marcus watched her, aware that his life was now bound to hers by an act of raw instinct. He wondered, not for the first time, whether fate had truly chosen him, or whether it was simply a matter of doing what was right when no one else would. Lyra turned, resolve hardening her features. She saw not just a champion, not a conqueror, but a man who had risked everything for a stranger. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future shaped not by tradition, but by the possibility of something new, something defined by courage and compassion. And so, in that opulent alien chamber, the destinies of a stranded miner and a royal princess became forever intertwined, their fates bound by a single selfless act. The challenger's voice rang through the throne hall like a blade drawn from its sheath. By ancient right, I invoke reckoning, he bellowed, face twisted with humiliation and rage. His armor gleamed in the torchlight, dented from the earlier duel, but his pride burned brighter than any wound. A hush fell. All eyes turned to Marcus, the outsider, the unwitting champion. Lyra stood, her lips parted in shock, but Falari tradition allowed no interference. Refusal, Marcus learned in a rapid, whispered aside from the matriarch, would mean his disgrace, exile, the stripping of all rights, perhaps even a quiet death in the night. Acceptance meant fighting the Falari way, a duel to the death. The crowd pressed in, hungry for spectacle. Marcus squared his shoulders, feeling every old scar burn with memory. I accept, he said, voice steady, though his heart thundered in his chest. The regent's lips curled in satisfaction. The challenger grinned, fangs bared. Lyra's face was unreadable, but her fists were clenched so tightly her knuckles blanched. That night, Marcus sat in the victor's suite, staring at his battered hands. The air smelled faintly of scorched metal and the wild, bitter herbs used in Falari medicine. Outside, the city's towers shimmered against the dusk. His thoughts circled like predators. The door whispered open. Lyra slipped inside, her movements wary yet determined. Her eyes, luminous in the dim lamplight, found his. She closed the door softly, the click echoing in the silent room. You should not be alone tonight, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, weary and grateful. Figured you'd be busy, what with everyone plotting my end. She crossed to him, every step taut with contained energy. You do not understand what you face. The challenger is our finest duelist. You cannot win if you follow Falari rules. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Then I'll just have to break them. Lyra hesitated, a storm of emotion passing across her face. Fear, hope, something more vulnerable. She sat beside him on the low bench, her gaze flicking to the bandage on his side. Her clawed fingers hovered above his chest, then settled lightly, feeling the steady thrum of his heart through the thin fabric of his shirt. He covered her hand with his own, anchoring her. The warmth of her touch sent a jolt through him, but he held steady. "I don't want to die, Lyra," he said quietly. "But I can't do this alone. Will you help me?" She looked up, eyes wide. "You trust me?" "With my life," Marcus replied. "Literally." Something shifted between them. A new intimacy, fragile yet fierce. Lyra nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then we are partners, not princess and champion, equals." They leaned in, foreheads nearly touching. The moment crackled, fear mingling with growing trust, and neither pulled away. The next hours blurred into a feverish collaboration. Lyra fetched old training blades, demonstrating Filari combat forms, fluid, precise, deadly. Marcus did his best to mimic her movements, sweat slicking his brow, but he quickly realized he was hopelessly outclassed. "This isn't working," he panted, lowering the blade. Lyra studied him, breathing hard, then offered a rueful smile. "You are strong, but you cannot move as we do. You must fight as yourself, not as one of us." Marcus grinned, catching his breath. "That I can do." They brainstormed, Marcus sketching out wild ideas in the dust on the floor, while Lyra critiqued and refined them. "Filari duels are sacred," she warned. "No ranged weapons, no poison, no killing blows until the final strike. But trickery is not forbidden, if it's clever." "Good," Marcus said, his eyes lighting with mischief. "Then we'll need metallic powder, something that can blind him, lamp oil for slicking the arena floor, and strong wire for a snare." Lyra's eyebrows arched, but she nodded. "I can get these. The kitchens keep lamp oil and the blacksmiths work late." Their days and nights blurred into a secret rhythm. They gathered supplies by moonlight, Lyra distracting guards with the authority of her rank, Marcus slipping through shadows, scavenging what he could. They smuggled the contraband into the suite, laying out their arsenal on the bed. A pouch of glittering metal dust, vials of pungent oil, spools of wire, and a battered length of pipe from the crash site. They rigged practice traps, testing timing and placement. Marcus spilled oil and nearly toppled into it, earning a peal of laughter from Lyra. Musical, unguarded, a sound he'd never heard from her before. "You are hopelessly clumsy," she teased, helping him to his feet. "I prefer resourceful," he retorted, grinning. They traded stories between experiments, Marcus describing asteroid mining runs and Finch's sarcastic commentary, Lyra confessing her childhood dreams of exploring beyond Filari space. They discovered a shared love of old star charts, a mutual hatred of ceremonial dinners, and an unexpected ease in one another's company. One night, as the fire burned low, they practiced hand signals, silent cues to coordinate in the chaos of the coming duel. Lyra pressed her palm to Marcus's shoulder. He squeezed her fingers in reply. Their communication became effortless, words fading into glances and gestures. Exhaustion finally overtook them. Lyra, curled against Marcus's side on the bench, drifted into sleep, her head pillowed on his shoulder. Marcus, heart aching with tenderness, draped a blanket over her. He watched her sleep for a long while, the moonlight painting her hair silver before he let his own eyes close. She woke before dawn, blinking sleep from her eyes to find herself enveloped in warmth, the blanket snug around her shoulders. For a moment, she simply watched him, his face softened by rest, his hand loosely entwined with hers. "Marcus," she whispered. He stirred, eyes meeting hers, and in that instant something unspoken passed between them. Lyra reached out, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, claws gentle. Marcus leaned in, closing the distance. Their lips met, tentative at first, then urgent, the kiss deepening as days of tension and longing found release. Lyra pressed closer, her body molding to his, her heart racing. Marcus pulled her against him, arms strong and sure, surrendering to the fire that had been kindling between them since the moment he'd saved her. When they finally broke apart, breathless and laughing, the barriers between them had dissolved. Alien and human, princess and minor, none of it mattered now. They were simply two souls, bound by fate and choice, partners in a fight that was suddenly about more than survival. Marcus brushed a strand of hair from her face. "We're really doing this, aren't we?" Lyra smiled, her eyes shining. "We are. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together." Side by side, they returned to their plans, their touches lingering, their laughter blending in the quiet hours before dawn. Their differences became a source of fascination, not fear. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Marcus and Lyra faced it not as strangers, but as something far deeper, something forged in trust, courage, and the wild, thrilling promise of love. Long before dawn, Marcus and Lyra slipped from the victor's suite, hearts beating in sync as they crept down the silent marble corridors. The palace was a labyrinth of shadows and secrets. Lyra led the way, her feline grace barely disturbing the cool night air. Whenever a patrol approached, she would press Marcus into an alcove, her body shielding his, her tail curling protectively around his waist. Sometimes she stole a kiss, quick and hungry, as if to draw courage from his lips. The arena loomed before them, vast and echoing in the half-light. Marcus paused at the edge, scanning for sentries, while Lyra whispered instructions in his ear. "Two guards at the southern arch. I'll distract them. Give me the signal when you're ready." Her hand squeezed his, claws gentle against his knuckles. He nodded, slipping into the maze of columns while she melted into the shadows. Moments later, he heard her laughter, bright, practiced, the sound of a princess feigning carefree interest. "I simply must see the moon from the highest gallery," she purred, drawing the guards after her like moths to flame. Marcus moved fast, heart pounding. He dug shallow pits in the sand, burying the small canisters they'd filled with lamp oil and metallic powder. Wires snaked beneath the surface, anchored to stone pillars and loose flagstones. Each trap was a promise, a chance, a hope, the only way he might survive a fight he could not win by brute force. When he finished, he found Lyra waiting in the shadows, her eyes shining with pride. "You are quick for a human," she teased, brushing the dust from his hair. "Are you sure you weren't born Filari?" He grinned, pulling her close. "I'm sure I wasn't born lucky, but with you, maybe I could be." He kissed her, slow and deep, until she laughed softly against his mouth. Their covert missions became a nightly ritual. Sometimes it was Lyra who crept through the sleeping palace with stolen keys, sometimes Marcus who scaled the outer walls, guided by her whispered maps. Every brush with danger drew them closer, the stakes sharpening every touch, every look. Back in their quarters, secrecy gave way to longing. The world outside fell away as they undressed one another by lamplight, hands lingering over new bruises and old scars. Lyra's tail twined around Marcus's thigh, anchoring her to him as she explored his body with fierce curiosity. She had grown up believing intimacy was about dominance, a contest of strength and possession. But Marcus undid her with a gentleness she had never known. He traced the arch of her back with slow, reverent hands, kissed the sensitive skin behind her ears, until she shivered and gasped. He whispered her name against her neck, each word a promise that she was not a prize, but a partner. For the first time, Lyra felt her defenses crumble. She let herself be vulnerable, let Marcus see the longing in her eyes, the wild hope she had always hidden. One night, after hours spent rehearsing escape routes and practicing silent signals, Marcus lay back on the tangled sheets, Lyra draped half atop him, her hair spilling across his chest. Her fingers traced the old mining scars on his arms. "You risked everything for me, before you even knew my name," she murmured. "Why?" He caught her hand, kissed her knuckles. "Because you were in danger. Because it was right. I didn't need a reason." Lyra looked at him as if seeing a new star rise over the horizon. "On Falari, love is conquest. Pleasure is power. But you make me feel cherished." Her tail tightened around his leg, possessive and tender. "You look at me and see an equal." Marcus's voice was low, rough with feeling. "I see the bravest person I've ever met." She pressed her lips to his, slow and searching. Their bodies fit together in a rhythm both alien and familiar. Lyra's claws left marks on his back, but her touch was careful, never drawing blood. She explored each line of his face as if memorizing him, and Marcus worshipped every inch of her, moving with a patience that unraveled her composure. They learned each other's secrets in the dark, the way Lyra's ears flicked when she was nervous, the place below Marcus's jaw that made him shiver. They whispered stories, Lyra's childhood dreams of freedom, Marcus's longing for a home he'd never found. The more they risked in the world outside, the more fiercely they clung to each other in private. "Are you afraid?" she asked once, breathless after love, her head on his chest. He stroked her hair, threading his fingers through the silvery strands. "Terrified. But with you, it's worth it." She laughed, the sound rumbling deep in her throat. "I never imagined I could love a human." Marcus smiled. "I never imagined I'd find someone worth fighting a planet for." They drifted into sleep entwined, Lyra's tail wrapped around Marcus's leg, her claws resting lightly on his heart as if to claim him. By day they played their roles, the distant princess, the strange outsider, hiding their alliance from watchful eyes. By night, they returned to the sand and stone, perfecting their traps and their trust. Each practice run was an exercise in strategy and surrender, Marcus learning to read Lyra's silent signals, Lyra learning to let go of control and move with Marcus's unpredictable human logic. One evening, Lyra slipped from Marcus's embrace, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a tangle of wire in her lap. "We have one night left," she said softly, braiding the wire with deft fingers. "Tomorrow, everything changes." Marcus knelt behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. "Then let's make this one count." They worked side by side, laughter mingling with the clang of metal and the hiss of oil. Lyra showed Marcus how to tie a Falari knot, strong enough to hold a charging beast. Marcus taught Lyra how to improvise a tripwire that would snap at just the right moment. The lines between them blurred, strategy flowing seamlessly into affection, every plan a testament to their growing bond. When exhaustion claimed them, Marcus tucked Lyra into bed, smoothing stray hair from her brow. She blinked up at him, eyes wide and vulnerable. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Always," he promised. Lyra curled against him, tail coiling possessively, her breath warm against his throat. She whispered secrets into his skin, fears, hopes, the simple truth that she had never felt so alive. In those quiet hours, Marcus saw past the warrior and the princess to the wild spirit beneath. He cherished her laughter, her sharp wit, the fierce way she loved. Lyra, for her part, marveled at Marcus's steadfastness, his gentle hands, the way he treated her not as a trophy, but as a partner in every sense. They built trust in the dark, weaving it through every whispered plan and lingering touch. For the first time, Lyra felt truly seen. For the first time, Marcus believed he might have found home. The stakes outside had never been higher, but inside their shared world, determination and devotion blazed even brighter. Whatever awaited them at dawn, they would face it side by side, lovers, co-conspirators, and equals. The day of the duel dawned with a restless wind and a sky the color of forged steel. From the balcony of the victor's suite, Marcus watched the amphitheater fill, Thousands upon thousands of Filari crowding the stands, their silvery manes and slit-pupilled eyes glinting in the morning light. The air vibrated with anticipation, the collective hunger for spectacle almost suffocating. He dressed in silence, wrapping his battered ribs and pulling on the armored vest Lyra had repaired for him. She lingered in the doorway, her gaze fierce and worried. "Remember the plan," she murmured, pressing her forehead to his. "You do not have to defeat him as they would. Survive. Show them what true strength looks like." Marcus caught her hands, squeezing them tight. "I won't let them take you from me," he promised, voice raw. Her tail curled around his leg in silent reply, her claws ghosting over his cheek in a gesture that was both a blessing and a claim. Then she was gone, swept away to her place beside the matriarch, leaving Marcus with the memory of her lips against his and the taste of hope. The herald's trumpet sounded, a harsh, brassy note that shivered through the stone. Guards escorted Marcus into the glaring sunlight, the roar of the crowd crashing over him like a wave. Across the pit, the challenger waited. Massive, armored in obsidian and bone, radiating barely contained fury. He flexed his claws, baring his fangs in a snarl meant to terrify. The regent rose, his voice amplified by the amphitheater's ancient stones. "Let the rite of reckoning begin!" The challenger wasted no time. He charged with a guttural roar, spear leveled for a killing blow. Marcus sidestepped, heart racing, and the spear tip bit only air. The challenger spun, lashing out with bone-crushing strength. Marcus ducked beneath the blow, drawing his opponent toward the arena's edge. The crowd murmured, restless. This was not the savage contest they expected. No locked blades, no contest of raw power. Marcus kept moving, eyes darting to the subtle mounds of sand, the glint of wire, the faint shimmer of oil. "Coward!" the challenger spat, voice booming. "Stand and fight!" Marcus answered with a tight smile, retreating toward his first trap. "If you want me, come get me." The challenger obliged, barreling forward. Marcus skidded sideways, his boots scraping a hidden trigger. A cloud of metallic powder erupted in the challenger's face, glinting in the sunlight, burning his eyes. He howled, swinging blindly. Marcus danced away, adrenaline burning through his veins. He could feel the crowd's confusion, some jeering, some uncertain, all witnessing a kind of duel no Filari had ever seen. The challenger wiped his eyes and rushed again, this time catching Marcus with a glancing blow that sent him sprawling. Pain exploded in Marcus's ribs. He tasted blood, felt something crack. He forced himself up, refusing to stay down. Across the sand, Lyra's face was a mask of anguish and pride. Their eyes met, and she touched her brow, one of their silent signals. Marcus drew a shaky breath, nodded, and limped toward the next trap. The challenger pursued, overconfident, his steps heavy. He slid suddenly, feet whipped out from under him by a slick of lamp oil. He crashed to the ground and the crowd gasped as flames erupted along the oil's edge. Marcus's signal flare, brief and blinding. Using the chaos, Marcus darted to the pillar where he'd strung his wire. The challenger lunged, furious, and Marcus yanked the wire taut. The challenger stumbled, entangled, falling hard. Marcus pressed the attack, not with Filari blade work, but with a battered pipe and the desperate ingenuity of a man who refused to die. Still, the challenger was relentless. He broke free, delivering a blow that drove Marcus to his knees, blood splattering the sand. The world spun, but Marcus remembered Lyra's voice. "Survive, show them." Gritting his teeth, Marcus staggered upright. "You can end this!" the challenger shouted, circling. "Yield and I might spare your life." Marcus spat blood, refusing to give the Filari the satisfaction. "Not today." He retreated, weaving past broken stone and scorched earth, drawing the challenger inexorably toward the center of the arena, toward his final trap. The crowd was on its feet now, voices rising in a storm of confusion and awe. Some called for blood, others watched in silence, seeing a new kind of courage. At the appointed spot, Marcus dropped to one knee, feigning exhaustion. The challenger closed in, spear raised for the kill. With a last reserve of strength, Marcus reached beneath the sand, fingers closing on the concealed cord. He yanked hard. A net of braided wire snapped up, ensnaring the challenger from ankles to shoulders. He roared, thrashing, but the trap held, tight and unbreakable. For a moment, the world was utterly still. Marcus, barely standing, limped forward and seized the challenger's fallen spear. He lifted it high, every muscle trembling, every breath a battle. The crowd leaned in, hungry for tradition, the death blow, the victor's right. But Marcus planted the spear in the sand at his feet. The silence was absolute. "She is not a prize to be won," Marcus declared, his voice echoing to the highest seats. "Her life is not my reward. It is my duty to protect her." He turned, blood streaking his face, and looked to Lyra in the royal box. Her eyes shone with tears, her heart in her gaze. Marcus's words rang out, shattering centuries of ritual. "I fight for her, not for possession, but for partnership, for love." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The matriarch stood, regal and unyielding. The regent stared, thunderstruck, while the challenger struggled uselessly in his bonds. Lyra rose to her feet, her voice strong and clear. "He has spoken true. Let his courage be the new law." The amphitheater erupted, not in outrage but in awe. Marcus swayed, every injury catching up with him, but he stood his ground as Filari tradition trembled on the edge of something new. He had survived, not by their rules, but by his own. And as the crowd roared its uncertain approval, Marcus met Lyra's gaze and knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Stunned silence rippled through the amphitheater, the ancient stones themselves seeming to recoil from the words Marcus had unleashed. The challenger sagged in the net, disbelief etched across his face. The regent stared, fists clenched, as if brute force could drag tradition back from the brink. All around, Filari eyes, amber, green, gold, widened, reflecting a world upended. Marcus stood in the center of the arena, battered, bleeding, unbowed. His declaration hung in the air, heavier than any blade. "She is not a prize to be won. Her life is not my reward. It is my duty to protect her." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, from the royal dais, Lyra broke. Tears welled in her eyes, tears she had never permitted herself, not in public, not in front of the court or the world. She vaulted the steps, her feet barely touching the ground, her heart hammering with relief and love and awe. "Marcus!" she cried, her voice raw and unfettered. He turned, pain forgotten as she flew to him. She threw her arms around his neck, clinging to him as if the force of her embrace alone could shield him from the centuries of expectation pressing in from every direction. Her tears streaked his bloodied cheek, mingling with the dust and sweat of battle. "You stubborn, impossible human," she whispered fiercely, pressing her brow to his. "You changed everything." He laughed, shaky and exhausted, his arms winding around her waist. "Didn't mean to start a revolution, just couldn't let them take you." The crowd's confusion dissolved into a wave of emotion, astonishment, hope, a flicker of something like admiration. The matriarch rose, her presence commanding silence without a word. Her eyes, old and wise, swept over the throng. "The right is fulfilled," she declared, her voice echoing from pillar to pillar. "The old ways have reached their end. Today, a new path is revealed. We do not have a new champion. We have a guardian prince." The amphitheater erupted, not with bloodlust, but with a rising chorus of voices, Filari whispering and shouting, the story already reshaping itself. No longer a tale of violence, but one of wisdom, compassion, and change. The challenger was cut down from the net, not as a vanquished foe, but as a witness to the new law. The regent bowed his head, his resistance shattering beneath the weight of the matriarch's words. Lyra led Marcus from the sands, his arm draped over her shoulders for support. As they reached the corridor beyond the arena, the noise faded, replaced by the hush of high stone and filtered sunlight. The guards stood aside, awestruck, letting them pass unhindered. In the sanctuary of their chambers, Marcus finally collapsed onto the bed, every muscle screaming. Lyra knelt beside him, her fingers trembling as she peeled away his armor and pressed cool cloths to his wounds. Gone was the regal princess. Here was a woman fierce with worry and devotion. "You need rest," she murmured, voice thick with emotion as she dabbed at a split lip. "I should have stopped you. I should have found another way." He caught her wrist, smiling despite the pain. "You did. You gave me a reason to fight." She pressed her forehead to his, her tail curling protectively over his leg as she worked ointment into the worst of his bruises. "All my life, I believed I was meant to be claimed. To be strong meant to be hard, unyielding, alone." Her voice shook. "But you showed me there is another way. That love can be tender." Marcus brushed a thumb across her cheek. "You taught me just as much. I never knew I could belong anywhere until I met you." When his wounds were tended, Lyra fetched a blanket and tucked it around them both, ignoring the formal seating cushions. She curled into his side, her body pressed close, her head resting on his chest so she could hear the steady rhythm of his heart. The silence that settled was unlike any they'd ever shared. Gentle, hopeful, full of possibility. Lyra traced circles on his skin, her claws light and curious. "Marcus?" He hummed, drifting in the space between pain and comfort. "Hmm? Will you teach me how to smile?" Her words were hesitant, almost shy. He turned his head, finding her gaze. "You've never smiled?" She shook her head, lips pressed in a line. "Not like you do. Not because I was happy." Marcus propped himself up on an elbow, ignoring the protest of his ribs. "All right. Lesson 1, he said, the corners of his mouth lifting. "Relax your face. Think of something that makes you warm inside." Lyra frowned in concentration, her ears twitching. "Like you?" she ventured. He grinned, his smile broad and unguarded. "Perfect. Now, let it show." She mirrored him, at first stiff and uncertain. Then, as he traced her jaw with gentle fingers, something shifted. Her lips curved, her eyes brightening with wonder. "There," he said softly. "That's it." She laughed, the sound more music than he'd ever heard. "It feels strange, exposed." "It suits you," he whispered, kissing her forehead. For a while, they lay together, her tail draped over his leg, their bodies tangled beneath the blanket. The noise of the city, the rumors, the retellings, the old ways crumbling, faded beyond the thick stone walls. In the hush, possibility grew. "What do we do now?" Lyra asked quietly, her hand covering his. Marcus entwined their fingers, his voice steady despite the ache in his bones. "We build something new, not just for us, but for everyone who watched today. A world where people choose each other. Where strength means standing together, not alone." Lyra nodded, her smile blooming again. A world of trust, of care. He pulled her closer, pressing a lingering kiss to her lips. "And love," he murmured. "Especially that." Side by side, they gazed out the window at the shifting city, its towers and courtyards, its people already whispering of the guardian prince and the princess who changed everything. The future pressed close, uncertain and bright, but their bond, tempered in chaos, sealed with hope, was unbreakable. And in that quiet chamber, with laughter and light and the warmth of newfound peace, Marcus and Lyra began to imagine a new world, one built not on conquest, but on the unshakable love they had discovered at the heart of the storm. Our story ends here. If you'd like to support us, you can use the Super Thanks button right under the video to leave a tip. It truly helps our team improve the quality of our work. We're grateful to each and every subscriber for being with us. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most in this video. Your feedback means a lot to our team. You'll discover many more captivating stories on our channel. See you in the next one.